Shabbat Shalom. We watch humanity again facing a crisis, and who knows what will happen. I occasionally watch episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Don't tell anybody. But I find them harmless and relaxing and interesting. And there was a very moving episode that I watched last week. And the captain of the Starship Enterprise, Jean-Luc Picard, is exploring the galaxy. This is what they do in the show. And they come across a probe floating through space of a very old technology compared to theirs. And suddenly a beam goes out of the probe and goes through the ship and its shields. And suddenly it hits straight at the captain, and he falls back and becomes unconscious. And nobody can do anything to revive him. The doctors are running to try and revive him. And then meanwhile, and this is where it gets quite interesting, he opens his eyes and he's in a completely different place, living a completely different life. And there's a woman next to him whom he does not recognize, and he's in a house, a nice looking house, and he's dressed in these simple, folksy clothes, and she keeps addressing him as Cayman, Cayman, Cayman. She says, "You've come out of your fever, thank God." He does not know who he is, and he just tells her, "Stop playing this trick on me, and please take me back to your ship." "And ship?" she says, looking very confused and disturbed. She says, "Well, maybe your fever's come back." And he says, "Who are you?" She says, "I am your wife." He says, "What planet am I on?" She says, and he has no idea. A moment before he was on this ship, and here he is in this other life. So he runs out of the house, and he's in this little quaint-looking town in a desert-like environment, and there are people who are planting a tree as a symbol of a renewal faced with a drought. All very nice. And they recognize him as Cayman. They call him Cayman. They say, "Come here." He said, "Stop playing this trick on me. Take me back to my ship." And he runs off. He runs off for hours into the nature, and finally, nothing he can do. He comes back to the house where he originally woke up and starts to confront this woman who said she was his wife. And she says, and he asked her about them. They've been married for 3 years. They were married in their later years. He is an iron worker and an artist. He loves to play the flute, none of which was true in his previous life. And she reaches out to him and she says, "Forget all this worry in your mind. Just come to me." And he rejects her. He doesn't know who she is. But she's very loving and sincere, and he says, "Okay." Back on the ship, only minutes have passed, and here he is. He's lying down, but the scans show incredible brain activity happening. And then you're back to his reality of 4 years have passed, and he looks older, and he spent a lot of his time trying to contact space or get out of where he is. He's tried everything, but to no avail. But he's also settled down. You can tell he has this loving relationship with his wife. He goes for long walks. And he begins to feel integrated into this community. He worries about their drought. And eventually his wife turns to him and she says, "Can you just let go of the past and be here present in the moment?" And finally he says, "Okay, and I will do what you asked me to do." And she'd asked him to build a nursery and for them to have children. And then it goes another bunch of years forward, and he looks even older, and they have children, and the communities around them celebrating a baby naming, looks a little bit like the bris we did a few days here ago in this sanctuary. And then more years pass, and his life is full and rich, and his children are grown, and his daughter is like him, a scientist, and they're investigating this never-ending drought, and she notices that there's no more life in the soil, and she's beginning to become worried about the planet. And there are more years pass, and he's elderly but content, and suddenly disaster strikes, and his wife passes away, his new beloved wife, but he just horrible in his grief. And of course, when he was back in his other life as a captain, he'd never married. But he continues on, and years pass, and finally in the final scenes, another 5 years have passed, and he's playing with his grandchildren, and he knows the planet that he's on is dying, and he speaks to his daughter about the impending doom, and he's worried about it. They go out into the bright sun, and they say, we're about to launch a rocket. And he says, well, what's the use of the rocket, and what's on it? And then suddenly, he sees his dead wife in front of him. And he sees his friend, another friend who passed away in front of him. And they all gather around him, and they say, well, you actually know what's on this rocket, because you saw it 30 years ago, right before you came here. It's a probe that we sent into space, and we lived 1,000 years before you. But we knew our planet, and we're all going to die. But we sent a probe out to space to find a teacher who will be able to continue on a message and teach others about what happened here. And the probe picked you. And just then, he wakes up, he's back on the ship. He's completely confused. 30 years have passed in his own mind, and he asks those around him, how long has it been since I've been unconscious? And they say, 25 minutes. A whole life, in many ways an ideal life. All those experiences he had. It's a story about many things, about the power of memory, about the power of love also, about the environment, maybe the illusionary nature of life itself. Well, what's real? When do you wake up to the real life and get to meet those who have passed on before? And where did they take you? But perhaps most of all, in my mind, it's a story about life itself and how powerful and beautiful and enduring that current of life is. One moment he's a ship captain, the next he's a family man in a small community, but he gets drawn in by the power of that life. In one, he uses his leadership skills and to serve humanity. In the other, he's his family, a small community, his interests and passions are at the fore. But all of it is life, and all of it is beautiful, and all of it is powerful. And here's this community that died 1,000 years before, but they found this way, so desperate yet loving, of continuing on their legacy and their memory, of passing it on, of finding through this way a teacher who can pass the message on to others. It's also about the power of being a human being in a broken world, and how transient everything is. Yet the power of our love, and of our care, and of our vitality, and how that transcends even death and destruction. And how so often we think, well, life is digital. 11:45 a.m. now is the time when I do this. 11:46 when I do this. But part of it was the message is that life is analog, a flow of experiences, of relationships, of joys and worries and sadnesses. But through all of it, however we experience of it, we're alive. We're alive. And we experience that life in the moment. And we do our best to pass on the blessing of that life to others. In the end, what is real and what is not, who knows? Here he is, he falls in love with a woman whom he did not choose to marry, but he has such a wonderful and rich life with her. And life draws us all into so many situations, some hard, and we don't know what to do with them, but ultimately they give us blessing and they give us new life. And we go from one to the other. In our parsha, we also see this power of life, the power of the current of life. Moses is on Mount Sinai, and the people are worried. It's taking him a long time to come down. So they make a golden calf. 40 days after God told them, do not make an idol. And the great tragedy that comes, and Moses breaking the tablets in his anger, and the people crying out, and God making a plague. God telling Moses he's going to wipe them all out. But yet life, as it always does, finds a way. And Moses comes back up, and he goes back up the mountain, and he brings new tablets. And God creates a tabernacle, and God creates Yom Kippur for forgiveness, breaking and healing and repair, and the people are healed. And they carry with them that experience forever, the experience of having fallen but then coming back up, and the wisdom that it gave them, what they learned through all of it. And now they can also teach others. Our world is in a worrying place. And we do not know how it's all going to end. But we also know that the power of life will find a way forward through all of it. The power of our love and the power of our memory. And life, yes, is very precious and fragile as we feel in such moments. But life is also indestructible because it's made of everything at all times. It is God Himself, Herself. It is Ein Sof, as the Kabbalists say, without end. It is a mystery. Last week there was one day where I was driving Shalva, my daughter, home from her piano and ukulele lesson. And the day had begun with challenges and issues, and as we drove, it was just that time of day, we caught a beautiful winter sunset. And the sky was orange, and the clouds were gleaming, and that wonderful effect of peace. We find faith in the power and beauty of all of it to move forward, and we keep growing and we keep learning. We keep exploring new spaces, inner and outer, and that is our journey of life. Shabbat Shalom.